the future of the banking industry going to change now in light of all this? Because this isn't just about one man and his bank, is it? Like some people are saying. I've seen a lot of that on social media. It runs far deeper than that.
It does run far deeper, but I do think we also need to be quite careful and not think that this is something that happens right across the banking industry, because it doesn't. And there's a number of parts that play into this. I mean, the first is there are legal requirements on banks to do checks for fraud and all sorts of things like that, which a lot of people complain about because they say, well, you know, why have I got to explain my transaction? And I've noticed that that is sort of getting muddled up in this. And then there's this second criterion, one does need to pay attention to it, called the political exposed persons criteria.
PEP, as it's known.
Exactly, and I'm one. Now, when you think I lost my seat in 1997, how on earth am I still a politically exposed person? It isn't the banks you need to blame for that. There is legislation and regulation that sits behind this. And whilst there's sort of certain criteria, you know, about doing extra checks and so on, we started to hear from politicians who said that this has affected their children opening a bank account, and that seems to me that somehow in this country we've taken things too far. And then there's the third piece, and that is the overlay, which in this particular instance, Coutts seems to have placed. And that overlay is something about, do we think this particular person, because of what they say and how outspoken they are, somehow impacts our reputation?
Reputational damage.
Exactly. And that, I think, is the real part of this whole thing where there's a big
so
question
is there
mark.
a danger that as a result of this, those things could even be exacerbated, that the banks try too hard? Because clearly Labour, Nick Thomas-Simons, the Shadow Trade Secretary, said, look, this should be a matter for these commercial concerns for the banks, not for government. If government tries to impose yet more things can go wrong.
Yes, because a lot of this has, directly or indirectly, come from either legislation which we've passed, and if I may say, one of the benefits of this is it kind of has woken up, I think, the political classes to what legislation they have approved, you know. And then the second piece comes from regulation, because you can't put to one side the fact that regulators are coming into banks and other financial institutions and saying, OK, so what are your policies on, for example, environmental and social inclusion? What are your values? Now, all of that is a good thing, but if you've got regulation pushing on one side and you've got law pushing on another, there will be areas where a decision is made which, as in this instance, puts you the wrong side of the line.
Right, so who should be the arbiter then? Should it be the board of the bank? Should it be the financial ombudsman? Or should it be the Financial Conduct Authority? Because it does seem that part of this, it's all fallen between the stools, if you like.
Well, at the moment, the decision for anything, as far as any public company is concerned, is, of course, that of the boards. Because the board has to say, right, here's the law, here's the regulation, this is how we wish to conduct ourselves. And can I say at this point that there's been a huge sea change in the whole culture inside banks, and for the better. And we do see that in the way that they deal with their customers. And we also see it in the way that some of the things people complain about, like, for example, why did I have to justify that transaction? I was only paying a pound, but that is fraud.
Sorry to interrupt. So when Nigel Farage asked for a cultural change, you think that may already have happened?
Oh, I think a lot of change has taken place within the banks. There's absolutely no denying that at all. He might want some more, and after all, if I was in Nigel Farage's shoes and it was me, you know, and I was prepared to be outspoken, because don't forget, a lot of people are not prepared to be outspoken. If I was being outspoken, I'd want to shoot everybody in sight and decapitate, you know, the entirety of the board. We need to be realistic about this, because there are certainly areas in which a bank has a legitimate right to say, we're no longer dealing with you. And also, there are some cases where they can't actually tell you that in any straight language. Anything to do with fraud or suspected fraud, you will be denied your bank account, and you won't be told, because the criminal authorities will need to investigate.